Uncover spine-chilling camping tales. Sinister secrets revealed in haunted wilderness. The Thompson family thought they were escaping the grind of Ash Hollow, but as night fell, the national park morphed into something else entirely, a sinister playground for shadows. Dave and Sarah, eager for a break from their exhausting lives, set up camp beneath a sky littered with stars, unaware that the trees whispered sordid tales of ages past. Their son Jake, glued to his phone, was less than thrilled about bonding over burgers and tents. But the pull of adventure under the eerie glow of the campfire was something he couldn't resist. As they gathered around the flickering flames, the night darkened, the air thick with tension. Unbeknownst to them, just beyond the circle of light, twisted branches stretched like skeletal hands, eager for victims. The tales of a lost soul who vanished in this very woods echoed in the back of Dave's mind. But he shook them off. Camping was supposed to be fun, right? But as Jake wandered off, curiosity tugging at him, the woods felt alive. He stumbled upon an ancient, dilapidated cabin, a ghost of its former self, vines strangling its facade. It beckoned him with unsettling whispers, tales of a man who had disappeared without a trace. Dismissing his unease as teenage bravado, he returned to the campsite. But laughter danced through the trees, unholy, mocking laughter that snaked down his spine. "Did you hear that?" Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible over the crackling fire. "It's just the wind," Dave replied, but even he sounded uncertain. Each snap of twigs, every gust of wind turned into a clawing fear crowding their minds. And then, as if gaining consciousness, their supplies began to vanish. Just packs of chips here, a flashlight there. The shadows thickened, lurking closer and closer, and Jake's flashlight flickered, casting staccato beams revealing fleeting figures darting just outside their sight. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The atmosphere grew dense, every bare branch scratching against another like fingernails on a chalkboard. Not a single star gleamed above, just the suffocating canopy that felt closer, tighter, pressing in on them. Breaths quickened. Hearts pounded as that oppressive silence stretched and pulled, creating a void that swallowed their laughter and hopes. "Just stay close," Dave urged, clenching his fists as he scanned the tree line, every rustle sending his heart racing. The woods exhaled chilling whispers that seemed to reassure them that safety was a lie, and they were merely offerings waiting to be claimed. Jake clutched his mom's hand, sensing the shift. The stories once a distant fable now felt horrifyingly real. Shadows twisted, flickering into human forms that loomed just outside their vulnerable bubble of light. Panic seeped into their bones. The air buzzed, thick with ancient secrets echoing around them, a reminder that they weren't alone. As fear tightened around their throats, they faced the inevitable, what lay beyond the campfire's glow, and as the shadows stirred closer, a haunting whisper could be heard among the trees, a chilling refrain: "Find the light." With dawn still a distant promise, the Thompsons realized the wilderness was hungering for them, teasing them with glimpses of what lurked just beyond. Would they emerge from this trial as a family, or become another ghost story whispered among the trees? The fire crackled, throwing sparks into the shrouded night. Each ember flickered like a distant star, but for the Thompsons, the warmth began to feel more like a trap than a comfort. The laughter that once echoed in the trees now twisted into a low, guttural growl, making the hairs on the back of Jake's neck stand on end. "Guys, we should get inside the tent," Jake suggested, his voice shaky. He glanced at the dark woods, shadows morphing, blending into shapes that no longer resembled mere trees. They appeared to shift and sway, almost as if breathing. "Don't be ridiculous," Dave snapped, trying to project confidence, but his eyes betrayed him, widened with fear. "It's just the dark playing tricks." But Sarah, gripped by an instinct she couldn't ignore, whispered, Maybe Jake is right. Feels wrong. Before anyone could respond, the darkness surrounding them deepened, swallowing any hope of safety. A sharp breeze howled through the campsite, sending the flames dancing wildly, now casting more ominous shapes. Just beyond the light, shadows conspired, blending and coiling around the trees like smoke. Sarah murmured, her voice tightening. What if something's out there? Suddenly, the tent flaps rustled violently. The sound pierced through the eerie silence, and all eyes snapped toward the source. The tent. They de-secured it, but a sense of dread loomed, gnawing at their ankles. Stay close, both of you, Dave commanded, every instinct now on high alert. He pulled out the flashlight, and the beams cut through the darkness like feeble swords against an invisible enemy. What was that? Jake said, his breathing heavy. A low growl, primal and deep, resonated from beyond the edge of their light. Jake's stomach twisted as he glanced back towards the woods. Shadows darted, quick and silent like a predator stalking its prey. Then, a flash, something glimmered in the dark, reflecting the light like a pair of hungry eyes. Did you see that? He gasped, gripping his mom's arm tighter. Yes. Sarah breathed, her heart racing. What is it? I don't know. We just have to stand together, Dave shouted, though his voice trembled as he shone the flashlight deeper into the trees. The beam revealed an unsettling scene, a shape. Tall, thin, impossible. A figure emerged slowly, moving gracefully through the branches, as if floating. Starved limbs reached outward, its skin marred and twisted, eyes not reflecting light but absorbing it, filling the shape with an abyssal darkness. The Thompson family froze, a collective gasp escaping their lips. The creature paused, studying them with an unnerving, knowing demeanor. Run! Dave shouted suddenly, breaking the spell of paralysis, and they sprinted for the tent, their only sanctuary. With adrenaline surging, they dove inside just as a shrill, inhuman screech split the night, echoing through the trees and rattling their souls. The tent flapped violently, struggling against an unseen force, clawing its way in. Shadows pressed against the thin fabric, whispering, waiting. A cacophony of sounds surrounded them, scratching, rustling, and more laughter, mocking their fear. We have to get out. He's trying to get in, Jake yelled, fear creeping deeper into his bones. Stay calm. We need to think, Sarah insisted, but her voice trembled with doubt. Outside, the surging darkness conspired relentlessly, and somewhere in that abyss, they could almost hear the faint echo of a phrase. You can't escape the light, it will find you. As they huddled close together, the whispers grew louder, wrapping around them like a shroud. The creature that loomed outside their minuscule protection was alive with hunger, with something darker than night closing in. No longer grounded by reality, the looming question pierced through their defenses. What awaited them if they dared to step beyond the light? With no way out here and nowhere to hide, the true horror of the wilderness awaited just outside their flimsy haven, flickering anxiously in the shadows. The tent quivered as the wind whipped around it like a pack of angry wolves. Shadows pressed against the fabric, relentless and ominous. Dave shone the weak beam of the flashlight at the walls, trying to pierce the darkness, but it felt as though the shapes were deliberate, toying with him, dancing just out of reach of the light. We need to stay quiet, he whispered, his voice barely above breath, cutting through the frantic rustling outside. They huddled close, Jake's wide eyes darting from his father to his mother, and back again. Something was out there. It wanted them. Did anyone bring a weapon? Sarah's voice trembled, echoing the fear inside them. It was a question born of desperation. In the safety of their living room, they never imagined they'd need a knife or a bat. Who brought such things to a camping trip? Nothing. Just a camping book, Dave muttered, his face pale, the weight of helplessness heavy upon him. He gripped the flashlight tighter, knuckles white, feeling the very essence of their safety slipping. Then came the sound, an unholy noise that shattered the veil of silence. A rasping sound, almost like fingernails dragging against the canvas of their tent. It was near, so near. Breathless moments passed, fear almost palpable. The scratching turned into a rhythmic tap, tap, tap a taunt. Is it trying to get in? Jake squeaked, his lower lip quivering. Just stay calm. Okay? Dave replied. But they all felt it, the pressure of impending doom settling like a cloud. The thumping escalated, now an insistent banging, each strike sending jolts of fear coursing through their bodies. With each impact, the walls of the tent sagged, as if the very fabric was being drawn towards the chaos beyond. We can't let it in. Sarah's voice sharpened, her maternal instinct raging against the fear. We need a way out. Look, Jake said suddenly, his finger trembling as he pointed at the flashlight. The beam flickered and dimmed, wavering like their courage. It's going out. No, Dave exclaimed, panic creeping in. The light sputtered, emitted one last feeble gleam, then plunged them into complete darkness. In that overwhelming blackness, their senses heightened. They could hear the soft, sinister whispers grow louder, consuming their thoughts with words they couldn't quite comprehend. Felt all too aware of them, waiting, watching, hungry. Where is it? Sarah's voice cracked as they leaned against each other. A fragile wall of safety bolstered by fear, and then silence. The haunting sounds outside faded, leaving just the trembling heartbeat of the family inside the tent. Silence, however, felt worse. Maybe it's gone? Jake's voice quavered, filled with trembling hope. The moment stretched thick around them, suffocating. Just as the words left his mouth, something landed on the top of the tent, a weight, heavy and suffocating. The fabric sagged downwards, pinning them beneath the pitch-black sky. Oh God, what is that? Sarah breathed in disbelief, horrified recognition dawning in her eyes. And with that, the tent began to rip. The Thompson family braced for the encounter they'd always feared, knowing they couldn't hide forever. As the tearing echoed their rising dread, a single thought surged through Dave's mind. What had they awakened in the darkness? Jake, Sarah, and Dave looked at each other, terror igniting their drive to survive. But would it be enough? The shadows stirred, closing in as the tear widened, revealing promises of chaos beyond. This was just the beginning of a nightmare that wouldn't let them escape. Outside darkness loomed a hungry specter, and somewhere, they could almost hear the mocking laughter, echoing across the night. Would they fight or be consumed? What happened when the light could no longer hold back the shadows? The fabric gave way with a deafening rip, a sound that reverberated through the cold night air. Dave's heart raced as he instinctively pulled his family closer, their breaths mingling in a shared panic. He could barely see the outlines of Jake and Sarah beside him, their faces pale, terror etched into their features. What is it? Jake whimpered, his tiny hands clenching his father's shirt. I don't know, Dave stammered, feeling the suffocating weight of dread wrapping around him like chains. Then, suddenly, the tent collapsed inward, the night spilling in like a dark tide. A silhouette emerged, creeping into the weak light of a nearby star. Run! Sarah shouted abruptly, her motherly instinct kicking in as she dove towards the widening tier. But the darkness had grown bolder. It breathed, a sound that turned the blood in their veins to ice, echoing deeper than the woods around them and the chaos. A form began to take shape. It was featureless, wrapped in shadows, limbs twisting unnaturally as it moved. Dave could feel the air thickening as though the very atmosphere around them was alive, clutching at their throats. It was the shape of something terrible, an embodiment of all their fears. Move! He shouted, pushing Jake and Sarah ahead as he stumbled out of the fallen tent. The world exploded in a cacophony of unnatural sounds and distant whispers that seemed alive, circling their heads. The trees loomed ominously, gnarled fingers clawing at the fragile thread of reality. Outside the tent, the moonlight illuminated a twisted path through the forest, but shadows slithered along with them, following like a sentient nightmare. Every rustle of leaves sent shivers down Dave's spine. Every crack of a branch made him jump. What had stirred these woods? We can't just run into the dark, Sarah cried, her voice hoarse with panic. We need to find help. There is no help. Jake's voice trembled, fear spilling over as he clutched his mother's arm. It's coming. Dave glanced back, heart pounding. The figure slinked forward, its form swirling as if it were woven from the very darkness that surrounded them. There were no eyes, no discernible features, just an overwhelming sense of hunger radiating from it. He took a step back, instinct screaming to flee. "We'll find a way," he barked, forcing himself to sound stronger than he felt. "We have to head towards the road. People will be there." As they darted into the trees, Dave led the way with an urgency that thrummed in his blood. Branches whipped at his face, stinging his skin, but he pushed on. The whispers began again, softer now, like a lullaby. "They're lost," the trees seemed to say. "They're ours, they're lying." He yelled, shaking his head violently. "Don't listen." Sarah stumbled, catching herself just in time. "What if it's too late?" she gasped. A frigid wind swept through, the scent of decay wrapping around them. Jacob's breath came out in quick bursts, eyes wide with terror. Then, suddenly, the ground beneath them gave way to a deep chasm, a black void that yawned open, inviting and terrifying. "It's a trap," Dave shouted, pulling Jake back just in time as the child was about to topple over the edge. But the darkness shifted, and from it, a sound emerged, tinkling laughter, high-pitched and malicious, echoing in the hollow of the woods. As the figure drew closer, Dave's thoughts raced. This wasn't some mere beast, they had awakened something ancient, a force that thrived on despair. They weren't just lost, they had stumbled into something far worse. "Move," Dave commanded once more, adrenaline coursing through his veins, pushing every ounce of love for his family into his legs. But time was running out, and the shadows were relentless. The laughter grew louder, mixing with their frantic breaths, echoing through the dark. Would they find the road beyond the chaos, or had they been ensnared forever in the embrace of night? The shadows seemed to whisper back, promising to reveal their darkest fears. It wasn't just a forest anymore. It was a labyrinth of their nightmares, and it was hungry. Would they escape or become part of the darkness forever? Branches scratched against the sides of their faces as they raced deeper into the woods, breathless and desperate. Every footfall seemed to echo, each rustle promising the glimmer of claws or the soft stroke of a phantomous hand. "What is that thing?" Sarah gasped, her voice breaking like fragile glass. "Just keep running," Dave urged, his heart pounding in synchronicity with his thundering footsteps. He dared a glance backwards. The silhouette had morphed into a chaotic swirl of darkness, a living fog with motives they couldn't begin to comprehend, yet it danced ever closer. The laughter grew louder, a cruel harmony that cut through the night and wrapped around his mind like barbed wire. Felt like poison, seeping into their veins. Jake whimpered. "Why is it laughing?" It likes to see us scared," Dave replied, fighting to keep his voice steady. "Just hold on." Panic swirled in his stomach as he pushed them ahead, fear gnawing at him. A part of him screamed that they wouldn't make it, that shadows were encroaching upon his family. His family. He wouldn't let that happen. Suddenly, ahead of them, the moonlight pierced through the trees, revealing a small clearing, an oasis of silver light in the oppressive darkness. "There," he shouted, hoping against hope. "We can make it to the light." But as they sprinted toward it, he noticed something flickering at the edge, a shape hunched over, watching. A chill crawled down his spine as the figure shifted, revealing itself more fully. Ghostly pale and skeletal, it held in its hands what looked like fragments of the abandoned tendrils of lives that had slipped away into the night. Flickering lights, like dying stars, lingered in its grasp. "Stop!" Sarah screamed, pulling back on Jacob's arm. "Don't go there. Stay behind me," Dave barked, but his voice trembled. The clearing was an illusion. The hollow laugh from the figure grew, its joy leaping at their fear. The shadows they had escaped were starting to claw back in. "Faster! Come on!" Dave yelled. The clearing grew closer, yet never quite within reach, as if mocking their every effort. The thinning air seemed to resolve into whispers. "They're afraid. They're lost, they belong to us." Dave shoved his family forward. He could see the edge of the forest, now a boundary to their salvation. Just a few more steps behind them, the dark figure shot forth, its mass stretching and condensing like smoke. The laughter was everywhere, filling his ears, making it impossible for him to concentrate. "Jake, Sarah, keep moving." He tugged at their arms. The darkness was consuming the last of his courage, squeezing it from him until he was gasping. And then he saw it, a shadowed limb reach toward them, elongated and twisted. But then, in a surge of adrenaline, they burst out into the clearing, slamming against an invisible wall, the boundary between the realm of nightmares and the world they knew. Breathless, they turned. Right there, just beyond the edge, the malign presence flickered like a dying flame. It stopped short, unable to breach the light. For a brief moment, there was silence. A beat, the earth hushed, the shadows still, wrapping around the perimeter. "What happens if we step back?" Jake whispered, eyes wide, filled with questions that churned with fear. I don't know," Dave replied, sweat trickling down his brow. "Can't follow us, can it?" But as the laughter faded back into the trees, mixed with soft, sinister whispers, doubt clawed at his stomach. With every moment, the shadows grew heavier, pressing in closer, as if waiting for an invitation. Then, just as they began to feel a glimmer of hope, the laughter returned, sharper, more piercing. "Are you so sure?" it taunted, filling the air with a threat more palpable than the sharp wind that howled around them. And in that moment, an idea hit Dave like a thunderbolt. "We need to find a way to fight back," he said urgently, seizing his family's trembling hands. "We can't let it win." As a murky fog began to swirl at their feet, shadows moved behind them, creeping toward the edge they had once perceived as safety. But how could they confront an enemy that thrived on fear? With the laughter echoing relentlessly in their minds, they needed a plan. There was no more room for mistakes. Their survival depended on it. What would they uncover within the dark corners of their own minds? Would their fears lead them toward salvation, or would they become part of the laughter forever? The fog swirled, thick and oppressive, gnawing at their ankles like a hungry beast. Dave could feel the weight of dread pressing in from all sides, the laughter echoing menacingly as it layered over his thoughts, drowning out reason. Every breath felt like a struggle against chains tightening around his chest. "We need light," he whispered urgently. "Something to fight it off." He scoured the clearing, his eyes darting from shadow to shadow. The pale figure flickered just outside the periphery, its essence bleeding into the night like ink spilled upon paper. "Where?" Sarah's voice quivered. She was clutching Jake tightly, and he could see the terror etched on both their faces. It twisted his stomach, a cocktail of fear and rage at the unknown. "Look!" he shouted, spotting an old lantern hanging from a gnarled tree bough, swaying gently as if beckoning them closer. He sprinted toward it, his heart racing, a glimmer of hope igniting amidst enveloping darkness. Would it work? He grasped the lantern, pulling it from its resting place. Dust motes danced in the beam of moonlight, and the glow illuminated the faces of his family, hope trembling on their lips. "Jake, grab some sticks," Dave called, holding the lantern aloft. He scanned their surroundings for anything that could help. Jake obeyed without hesitation, racing toward the base of the tree. Dave heard the snap of twigs and branches. The laughter from the depths outside the light intensified, a cacophony mocking their desperation. "Get ready," Dave shouted as he lifted the lantern just as Jake returned, handfuls of dried branches ready. "We need to light this." With shaking hands, he fumbled in his pockets for matches, swearing under his breath as he fought against the panic boiling in his chest. "Quick!" Sarah pressed, eyes darting frantically. The laughter was a monstrous wind now, clamoring for them with fervent cries. Dave struck a match, his heart racing like a runaway train. Struggling to bring the flame to the pile of sticks, he took a deep breath to steady himself. "Simon, Simon," he muttered, the darkness thrumming in response, pulsating around them. The match flickered, threatening to extinguish before it caught. And then it blazed. Flames flickered to life, casting a warm glow that stretched across the clearing. The shadows hissed, the laughter turning into shrieks of outrage. Back, back, Jake yelled, pushing Sarah to the side as he lunged into the biting darkness beyond the light. Dave shouted for him to return, terror gripping his heart. But Jake didn't stop. He threw the sticks into the shadows like a fitful grenade. The moment the wood struck the black, it erupted into violent sparks. The figure recoiled. The shriek that pierced the air was unlike anything Dave had ever heard, a primal scream reverberating through the trees, sending vibrations coursing through the ground beneath their feet. "What are you doing?" Sarah screamed, terror twisting her voice into a knot. "I have to. He can't hold us here. I won't let it." Jake roared, rushing back, looking toward his father's desperate eyes. But as the flames danced, illuminating the forest around them, the shadows receded, revealing dark forms, or were they just figments of the embers? The laughter began to morph into something else, deeper, more sinister. It was feeding off their fear. "Dave, we need to get out," Sarah cried, looking at the roiling darkness beyond the flame's reach. "Now." Heart racing, Dave glanced beyond the light. The entity twisted, flaring in and out like dying breath, but it wouldn't disappear. Then, clarity struck him. "The light. We can keep it alive." "We must." Another scream interrupted him, gut-wrenching as if the darkness were tearing itself apart. Suddenly, three shapes loomed behind him, ghoulish outlines forming from the shadows, their elongated limbs stretching further, eyes glimmering with malice. "The light is only a momentary shield." The dark laughter echoed, deeper than before. "We are always here, waiting. Let us move." Dave shouted, pulling his family together. They had to find a way out, but the forest felt like it was clenching around them, roots creeping up to ensnare their feet. Would they be fast enough to escape? Or was this just the start of an endless nightmare? In the pulsating dark around them, the laughter escalated again, promising the depths of terror that lay ahead, as a question trailed in the air. How far could fear take them before they succumbed? They surged forward, the lantern illuminating a trembling path through the underbrush. Shadows writhed like wraiths, but with every flicker of light, they felt a fragile sense of protection cradle them. The laughter morphed into a growl, low, guttural, encased in malice that made the hairs on Dave's neck stand upright. "Stay close," he barked, pulling Jake and Sarah against him, the heat radiating from the lantern barely touching their skin under the weight of evil pressing down. But the woods were alive, each branch snapping beneath their hurried steps, a reminder that something was tracking them, lurking just beyond the edge of the light. Dave could feel the chill in the air, a creeping sensation creeping beneath his skin. Glancing back, he caught a glimpse of the shapes moving closer, relentless in their pursuit. "Faster!" His voice cracked, urgency bleeding into panic. "Please, it's getting closer." Jake's cry pierced through the chaos, and Dave's heart plummeted. The shadows were closer now, grotesque figures lurking just outside the reach of the flames. Just keep running. It felt wrong. A desperate attempt to escape the unknowable nightmare looming behind them. The laughter was now a whispering chorus, tickling their ears with promises of despair. "We can't let it catch us." The forest twisted and turned, each turn feeling more like a trap, the trees looming like ancient sentinels, their gnarled branches closing in. The clarity of the path ahead was becoming muddled, fear clouding their senses. "Here!" Dave shouted, spotting a narrow gap between two sprawling roots. "This way!" He hurled himself through and pulled Sarah and Jake in, squeezing them tightly against him. They huddled together, breathing heavily, their faces illuminated only by the flickering flame of the lantern. They were hidden, momentarily safe. But the shadows outside shifted and darted closer, hungry and impatient. The dark laughter crescendoed into a frenzy as the shapes circled where they had just been. "Do you think it lost us?" Sarah whispered, her voice barely above a breath. Dave didn't answer. Instead, he pressed the lantern closer, his eyes darting to the entrance of their crude shelter, heart thrumming against his chest like a wild thing. It felt like any minute, the darkness would pry them from their haven. Dad Jake's voice was small, shimmering with apprehension. What if it comes for us here? No, we'll wait it out. He didn't believe it. It was just a flimsy barricade made of doubt. The laughter was still there, constantly circling, pulsating with dark delight. It knew they were there. Suddenly, something brushed against the roots above them, a whispering sensation that crawled down Dave's spine. It wasn't just sound or vision. Fear took on a physical form, wrapping around them like a noose. Then silence. The laughter fell away, leaving an oppressive stillness that was somehow more terrifying than the clamor. Outside, shadows flitted back and forth, melding into one another like liquid smoke. Maybe it left, Jake ventured, but Dave shook his head. No, it's just waiting. And then, it happened. The low, rumbling voice pierced through the silence, spoken with a malicious glee. You think you can hide forever? The game has just begun. A tremor shook the ground beneath them. Roots seemed to pulse with life, writhing under the pressure of something unseen. Run! Now! Dave shouted abruptly, yanking his family back to their feet as the roots around them began to constrict like grasping hands. They burst into the clearing again, the lanterness flame dancing wildly in his grip. But the darkness had shifted, revealing more shadows, more shapes, all converging on them. An abandoned cabin nestled among the trees loomed ahead. Over there, Dave shouted, adrenaline coursing through him. We can make it. Hope flared for a brief moment, cutting through the haze of fear. They rushed toward the cabin, breathless and desperate. But as they reached for the door, it swung open, revealing a figure cloaked in shadows, grinning with a smile that split its face. Welcome to the end of your escape. Cold dread settled in Dave's stomach as the entity in the doorway opened its arms wide, beckoning them to step into its realm. Would they find refuge, or a final trap? The choice loomed like the darkness creeping up behind them, waiting. The figure loomed before them, a grotesque parody of welcome, its grin stretching wider, like a mole ready to consume them whole. Shadows encircled its form, pulsating as if alive, writhing against the pale moonlight. Get back! Dave shouted, instinctively stepping in front of his children. Panic surged through him, mingling with an instinctual need to protect. The entity's laughter was a twisted melody, a symphony of despair that filled the air like smoke. But as powerful as his will was, the icy grip of fear tightened around his heart. What do you want? He demanded, his voice cracking under the strain. It tilted its head, curiosity dancing in its eyes, or what passed for eyes behind the veil of shadows. Want? Oh, dear one, I want to play stand back. Sarah's voice cut through the tension, fierce and desperate. We won. The creature's laughter interrupted, its voice a slithering whisper. What want you do, little one? Will you not run? It's only a game. Dave's eyes darted to the woods surrounding the cabin. The shadows were growing thicker, coiling like snakes ready to strike. He could almost feel their breath against his skin. He needed to act quickly. Now! He shouted, grabbing Sarah and Jake by their arms. He pulled them back, but the figure stepped forward, closing the distance. Stay with me. The lantern flickered, the light dimming as if it too were afraid, and the figure's smile widened, absorbing what little illumination remained. Such a hasty retreat, it crooned, circling them slowly, the darkness tightening its grip. Why not invite me into your game? Dave's heart raced as they stumbled backward, the weight of impending doom pressing closer. We'll take our chances outside. He spat, adrenaline fueling his resolve. But as they turned to bolt, the door slammed shut behind them, making the air crackle with malevolent glee. The laughter echoed, taunting them, weaving through the thickening shadows. Your game was over before it began. The entity cooed with a sinister sweetness. The cabin felt alive, breathing, the walls pulsating like an enraged beast cutting them off from salvation. Panic clawed at Dave's throat. Let us out, he screamed. We're not afraid of you. But you can smell it, can't you? The fear? It's so delicious. Jake's grip tightened on Sarah's hand as terror choked the air around them. Dad, it's too much. We can't stay here. Shut up, he hissed back, his anger melting into desperation. They needed a plan, a desperate escape from this nightmare. Suddenly, the lanterns sputtered and went out, plunging them into darkness. Breathing in the thick air, shadows curled around them like fingers, whispering secrets but offering no solace. Then they heard a rustle, soft at first, but growing louder, echoing from the corners of the dark room. Something moved beyond the door, tapping softly, like fingernails against wood. "Let us out, let us play," the creature crooned from the other side of the wall, a voice filled with a tantalizing hunger. Dave pressed his back against the wall, heart racing as the whispered promises flooded over him. "We will not play your twisted game," he yelled defiantly, but inside, dread clawed deeper at a pause. Then an explosion of laughter erupted, filling the room, drowning out their thoughts. "Oh, but you already are. The game has only just begun." And then nothing. A stifling silence engulfed them, wrapping tight like a tomb, leaving only Dave's heavy breaths echoing in the stagnant air. "Any ideas?" Sarah whispered, panic laced in her tone. He glanced around, searching for an exit, for a glimmer of hope amid the darkness. But would they find a way out? Or would the cabin become their final resting place? "Maybe we can," but the resounding crash of the door splintering open cut him off. "Welcome to my world." The shadows surged inside, rushing toward them, an unholy wind howling through the cabin. As the darkness closed in, Dave realized they had made their choice, but it might just lead them to a fate worse than death. What would the shadows demand in return for their lives? The shadows echoed with a cacophony of voices, swirling and entwining around them like living smoke, each wisp promising dread and delight. The cabin's walls trembled, vibrating with sinister laughter as if the very structure relished the chaos it had birthed. Dave's heart thundered in his chest. "Run!" he barked, scrambling toward the splintered door, shoving Sarah and Jake ahead. Each second felt stretched thin, weighted by a fear so thick it gave him a headache. Time was slipping through his fingers, and so was hope. But then the shadows unfurled, blocking the way like a swarm of biting insects. Panic surged up his throat, hot and bitter. "Back! Back!" he yelled, pulling his children to him, scanning wildly for an escape route. Any escape route. "Dad, it's everywhere!" Jake cried, eyes wide, filled with an unholy terror as the swirling mass of darkness pressed in. "What do we do?" "Stay together," Dave forced out, fighting through his own trembling limbs. They couldn't let the entity separate them. That much was clear. Together, they stood a fighting chance. Alone, they were doomed. Such spirit. The voice hissed, a dark serenade laced with mockery. "But let us see how long it lasts." From the wall to the left, a draft chilled the air, slithering past their skin and stealing their breath. In its wake, a shadow spread across the floor, a hand, grotesquely long fingers curling towards them. "No!" he screamed, adrenaline surging. "Stay back." He grasped the lantern's butt, the dark's hunger reaching for them like claws. With a sudden flicker, a thin beam of light burst forth, illuminating a swirling pattern of dread on the floor. Thousands of eyes, all watching them, each one filled with glimmering malice. "Look!" Sarah shouted, pointing to the walls. The faces melded into the surface. Their mouthless screams echoed as the shadows grinned wider. Dave's grip tightened around Sarah and Jake. It was wrong. Everything was turning wrong. "Dad, what are they?" Jake whimpered, echoing the panic coursing through Dave's veins. "Just shadows," he insisted, but the words sounded hollow, even to him. They were not mere shadows. They were tormentors wrapping around their bones, squeezing, suffocating. In that instant, Dave felt a heavy weight crash against him, snapping him back into the moment. "We need to get out," he shouted, determination flooding through him. "Over there." Sarah pointed, fingers quivering, directing their panic toward a slim opening behind a cloaked figure. With a burst of adrenaline, Dave took Sarah's hand, then grabbed Jake's. He surged toward the clear path, forcing through the pulsating mass that tangled around his legs. The laughter grew shrill. An icy grip latched onto his ankle, pulling back violently. "Join us," it screeched, vibrating against his skull. "You cannot escape." But with a primal scream that echoed off the wooden walls, he jerked free, dragging his children with him. The weight of failure loomed over him, but every step burned with furious urgency. They ducked through the darkness, barely avoiding the outstretched fingers of the shadows. But just as they reached that sliver of light, the ground beneath them shifted as the cabin groaned. The wooden floorboards cracked. The shadows roared, a breathy crescendo that nearly shattered their resolve. And suddenly, the earth gave way under their feet. They were falling, tumbling down. Panic engulfed them, the darkness swallowing the light whole. Desperation clawed at Dave as they plummeted into an abyss, screams blending with the silence of the unknown. What waited below? Would it be the end, or something worse than death? As the air rushed around them, a familiar taunting laughter echoed in the distance, suggesting the game had only just escalated. Would they ever escape the murky depths of the shadows? The Thompson family landed with a thud in an underground chamber, the air heavy with an acrid scent like burnt earth. Dim light flickered from above, but it was not the lantern. It pulsed with eerie vibrancy, casting twisted shadows that danced on the walls like wraiths celebrating their return. For a moment, the family lay sprawled on the damp floor, breathless and dazed, their hearts pounding wildly. "Are we dead?" Jake gasped, his voice shaking. "No, we're not dead," Dave replied, pulling himself up, urgency coursing through him. "We just have to keep moving." "Where?" Sarah's voice trembled. The walls seemed to whisper, seductive and cold, echoing with the shadows' laughter above them. "What is this place?" "Just another trap," Dave muttered, determination tightening his jaw. He pushed himself to his feet, extending a hand to help Sarah and Jake. Together, they formed a fragile line of hope amid the oppressive darkness. "We have to find a way out." Shadows coiled around them, the sounds of ghostly whispers lapping against their ears. "You thought you could escape, but the game is just getting started." A voice resonated through the chamber, smooth and enticing. "Shut up," Dave shouted, clenching his fists. "We will not play your game." The laughter echoed, thick and suffocating. But in that moment, something in Dave shifted. The fear that had paralyzed him coalesced into defiance. "We didn't come this far to give up. We know what you want, it's our fear." Jake and Sarah mirrored his resolve, eyes steely with newfound determination. The shadows and whispers swirled around them like a tempest, but they stood together in defiance. "Let us find a way to beat them," Jake exclaimed, clutching his mother's hand, both scared and ready. "Right," Dave nodded, the urgency firing through his veins. "Look for anything that can help us stand against this." They began to scour the claustrophobic chamber. The walls buzzed with the malevolent energy of the shadows, but their resolve shone like a beacon against the smothering dark as they searched. Dave felt a pulse of energy in his gut, a glimmer that perhaps fear wasn't their only weapon. Clusters of crystals, shimmering on the walls in unexpected colors, caught his eye. They radiated a soft glow, illuminating their surroundings as if mocking the darkness. "Look," Sarah pointed, her voice solid and clear. "These might be the key." "Yeah," Jake added, stepping closer. "Maybe we can use them to light our way." Dave nodded, his intuition igniting. They gathered the glimmering shards, their warmth contrasting with the cold tendrils that encircled them. As they clasped the crystals tightly, a surge of energy burst through them. It wasn't just light, it was power. The shadows recoiled as they pressed on, illuminating the chamber as they advanced. "Keep moving," Dave urged, his voice firm, guiding them toward an archway that glimmered in the dimness. With every step, the dark whispers grew frantic, their confidence wavering under the radiant warmth emanating from the crystals. "You cannot fight us," the voice echoed, but it sounded shrill now, anxious. "Yes, we can," Jake shouted, and the words ignited a fire in Dave's chest. They pushed forward, emerging into another chamber, vast and echoing, under a dark sky illuminated by ghostly lights. "Now what?" Sarah asked, the vastness overwhelming as shadows flickered in the corners. "Look," Jake shouted, his voice buoyed with hope. Straight ahead stood a lit archway, pulsating like a heartbeat. "That's our way out." But just as they took a step toward it, the entity emerged, towering, angry, and monstrous, shadows swirling around like a tempest. You think you can escape? You will pay dearly for your defiance. Fight! Dave yelled instinctively. We have the strength now. The family raised their crystals, light radiating from them like beams of sun piercing dark clouds. The shadows shrieked, contorting and curling back from the glow, revealing their monstrous forms, all mouths, no eyes, slipping further into the distance. Breath quickening, Dave felt adrenaline pulse through him. On my count, he steadied his grip, heart racing along with the laughter that surged around them. 1, 2, 3. They launched the crystals forward. A blast of radiant energy burst forth, sending tongues of bright light toward the entity. The darkness writhed, torn between the despair of their dread and the light that promised freedom. The air crackled, a riot of energy against their nightmares. They pressed on, shouting back, "We won, TB, part of your game." With a final surge of courage, they released their fear and embraced their light, unified in their love for one another, and darkness imploded, shattering around them as blaring laughter turned to screams. The shadowy form collapsed inward, dissolving into shards of darkness that swept away like smoke. The momentary stillness that followed felt heavy, but it was light, warmth, a sense of triumph gleaming through their shared breath. Together they stepped through the illuminated archway, emerging back into the fresh air of the forest, dawn's early light breaking through the canopy. Fresh scents enveloped them, reality returning in a rush. Dave turned to Jake and Sarah, their faces lit with relief. "We did it," he breathed, a sense of wonder reflecting in his eyes. They were back alive, together. And then it hit him, tears started streaming. "Our strength, our love, it's what saved us. We faced down our fears." Jake's voice echoed through the branches. "And we're ready for any camping trip now." They held each other tight, forging a bond deeper than the forests around them. A promise to face fears together, no matter how dark the shadows felt. As they returned to their campsite unfazed and empowered, the birds broke the silence, singing joyful hymns as if celebrating their victory. The shadows had not claimed them. Instead, they had emerged stronger, fueled by unity. Together, as they packed, ready to leave the haunted wilderness behind, they knew one undeniable truth. Darkness couldn't win when light and courage burned bright. Now, here's the thing. If you love this conclusion, you need to subscribe immediately to the channel. Don't miss out on the next exclusive stories that will send chills down your spine. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and share the fear with your friends. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories. How do you feel about the Thompsons' adventure? And don't wait even one more second to share this wild ending with at least 5 friends who need to see it. Show your support, because only true fans understand the importance of a community united by thrilling tales.